How we doing? It's IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and running, and this has been coming for a long time. I've been here at Irish Breakdown for a year now. I don't know how many shows that I've done at this point, but I finally get to do a show with Shaun Davis. We've never done a show together before. So, how you doing, Shaun? Good to see you again on
Man,
the
I
other end.
am absolutely stoked. I remember when you
Me
first
too.
contacted me, I was like, "Oh, absolutely, Mr. Stiles, absolutely." And we've seen each other on campus at practices, but really have never had time to like really talk and really
Right.
dive into things. So this is going to be amazing, amazing.
Going to be a lot of fun here today. And I didn't realize until we talked this spring that you were at ESPN 1000 in Chicago there for a long time. How long were you at ESPN 1000?
I was at ESPN 1000 for 5 years, and so
Okay,
I was actually there producing Notre Dame basketball.
right, and that's what you
So
told me that you
yeah,
used
I
to
had
talk to
performed.
to, to one of my old guys, Bob Henning, the engineer down the
Bob
line all the
Henning
time.
is one of the biggest influences on my career when it came to engineering, along with producing and
Okay,
teaching me how to properly engineer and get better at it. Man, every time I go to South Bend, I look for him. I'm like, man, I call him. I haven't had a chance to hook up with him yet. And each time we say, you know what, we're going to find time to go and have lunch one of these days. But Bob Henning is a huge influence on my life. And of course, talking down the line to Zach Hill's land and Jack, you know,
right.
all the time was a
Yep,
joy within
yep.
itself. So absolutely, that was a great experience to be able to work that board and engineer Notre Dame basketball games.
Bob is a very busy man. He has the patience of a saint, though. He's
I
sometimes.
agree with that. Because I could definitely say there were times where he probably wanted to wring my neck on the other end. It definitely showed the patience of Joe with me, and I appreciate it.
And there are times, like when I've been at the other end, like because I didn't have a Bob sitting next to me doing games, and I still don't have a Bob sitting next, so like I'm trying to diagnose everything. And so when things go wrong, I'm calling Bob and he's
Right.
trying to like calmly talk me through stuff and and sometimes, my level goes up a little bit,
Right.
So like I
I,
said, he's
I,
very patient. He's
I
very
totally
patient.
understand the most nervous energy I would ever get is when Bob would say, "Oh, they're going on the road and I'm not coming," and I'd be like, "Oh boy, who's engineering, Bob? Oh,
Well,
I got a guy. He's fine. He'll call you." I'm like, "Oh boy, we'll see how this goes." But things always turned out well. As I said before, he was one of the most important influences on my career.
I
So
enjoyed your retweet of Brett Bielema, by the way,
yeah, I like
today.
it. Yes,
Somebody tweeted who's the best
coach in the Big
coach in the
Ten.
Big Ten, and they had
Yeah,
Harbaugh, James Franklin, they had Luke Fickle, and who was the fourth one? Ryan Day
right
was
there.
was on there, and Brett
Yeah.
Bielema retweeted it and said, uh, "Who has the most Big Ten titles?" Asking for a friend.
I thought the way he's gone about, influencing Illinois and getting them back to the map and just putting that out there, just having fun with it. That's how the way I took it. He was just having
Right,
fun. And I
right.
thought it was funny. And I was like, let me go ahead and retweet this as an Illinois alum because I think it's pretty funny.
That was good. That was good. Salty says he just watched Ann emasculate John over the life insurance. John just got the just get the damn insurance. I'm tired of the matching. I think I brought this commercial up before without saying it. Like I watched the NFL Network during the day, and there are these two insurance commercials
Hmm.
where the wife just yells at the husband for like 90 seconds on these commercials about why don't you have the life insurance yet, and this is one of them that Salty's talking about here. So yeah, they drive
It's
me
always
nuts.
good to see Salty.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, hey, we're going to talk a little about Justin Scott. We're going to talk about Isiah Canion in a little
Hmm.
bit. I thought, though, we'd break things up a little bit today with Independence Day coming up tomorrow, of course. And
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. July 1st is always, like when the college calendar flips. That's like the beginning of the new year, for college, the college year basically is July 1st when all the contracts begin and all that stuff. 14 FBS schools joined up new conferences on July 1st over the weekend. The most significant, Houston, Cincinnati, Central Florida, and of course BYU going to the Big 12. The others, smaller conferences, but still FBS, but smaller.
Right.
But those are the big ones. And Notre Dame, the not the lone holdout, but one of the few holdouts, in terms of independence. Why do you think there's always such a national obsession with Notre Dame joining a conference, though, Shaun?
Well, I think everyone always wants company, right? Just in life. They just want company. They want everybody to do the same thing. Anyone that chooses to stand out and do things differently, they view as rebellious, a rebel, going against the grain. And that actually, Notre Dame, in my opinion, historically, they've been trendsetters,
Right.
in a lot of different ways. And I think they were a trendsetter when it came to sticking to their independence and not going the route of some of the other teams like Florida State, Penn State, Miami, and securing the bag, as we would say, with the TV deal and the relationship with NBC and building off of that. They knew that they had the cachet. They knew that they had the brand. They knew that they had the tradition, and they knew that it would last. That's something that I think other programs weren't too sure if they could stand the test of time. And Notre Dame stood tall and it went against the grain, but they actually, at that point in time, as an independent, were being trendsetters to the other independents to say, look, handle your business, build your brand, take care of your brand, and get the best deal that you can get. They went and did that, and they've been able to hold the fort. And unfortunately, everybody else caved and went the route of the ACC to go ahead and get the best money. And now look at the ACC now. Everybody's trying to get out of the ACC.
Yeah,
you have 6 or 7 schools trying to escape the contract clause and not wanting to pay the humongous buyout. And Notre Dame is still sitting tall, ready to go into another contract. The way it looks like that might be between 60 to 75 million as an independent. And other conferences look at that and say, well, I don't understand why you just can't join the conference and get that amount of money. The last I checked, my grandfather told me, you get paid for a hard-earned day of work. Right? You get
That's
at
right.
the end of the day, you get what you've earned.
Right.
Notre Dame has earned the right to get this 60 to 75 million. Why do they have to share it with other people in the conference?
Right.
This is what they've earned in the open market. So allow them to do that without it being a big uproar. Now, at some point, we anticipate that there will be further moves, and further conferences expanding. And Notre Dame might get to the point where they might feel like they're in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the college football playoff. At that time, yeah, I'm sure they'll think about it, but it'll be interesting how it impacts the TV deal at that time, if they have one. And then they go into a conference. How does that play out? That's going to be very interesting to see how those things play out. Yeah.
And I'll be curious, like if they do re-up with NBC, for example, and obviously everyone, with Pete Bavacqua coming over, everyone thinks that, okay, going to go to NBC, and the more you see and hear, like people thinking that, okay, it's probably going to stay with NBC because of that agreement they have with the Big Ten. Look, I'm curious, since a new contract is coming up, like if there will be some kind of out for Notre Dame, like if they build something in there, you know what I mean, just to protect themselves in case just these ripples that you're talking about do happen going
Absolutely.
forward. I would think that they would. Wouldn't you?
That will have to be part of the negotiations, looking into the future. And I think Pete Bavacqua understands that. And I think NBC or whatever network the negotiations are taking place with, they understand that as well. And then, I see, the people in the chat, that feel like, man, I would rather have more money in a conference. Well, this is the thing. When you join a conference, it's like being married. Their debt is your debt. Well, so now when we look at, because great story was just put out, I believe in The Athletic about a month ago, that the deal that Kevin Warren made before he left to take the job with the Bears wasn't as sweet as everybody thought. And they owe money to Fox, and they owe
Turns out
money
there's
as a
all kinds
conference.
of holes in it. That's right.
Absolutely. So now everybody shares in that expense. So for Notre Dame, is it really about the 60 to 75 million, or is it about being able to control your own expenses as a university as well?
Well, and on top of that, like when it comes to the college football playoff, as it is right now, we know Notre Dame's going to have access, when the college football playoff expands next year. If you're in a conference, you go to the college football playoff, you still have to share that revenue with everybody else in the conference.
Absolutely.
If you're Notre Dame or, any other independent, obviously, you get to keep all that money. So you might not have the same amount that the Big Ten or the SEC is going to have in the TV contract, but you're going to get to keep every penny that you get from being in the college football playoff because you don't have to share that with the rest of the people in the conference. That's still Shaun, a pretty big advantage right there.
You have to feel, if I were Ohio State and I'm looking at Rutgers and they get the same check I get every year, I would feel a certain way. I know I would.
Right. Well, and that's part of the rift in the ACC right now. Obviously is you've got Clemson, who's doing most of the work there in the ACC, especially the last 7-8 years, whatever it is. A little bit before that, Florida State, but really, otherwise, who's doing the work in the ACC? And the bottom feeders in the conference, the Boston colleges of the world, are getting just as much revenue as Clemson at the top. That's right.
And their programs are fiscally, blossoming. And Clemson is still trying to, spend $3 to $4 million in recruiting just to keep up with the big dogs and have a national contender every year. And Boston College is probably pocketing that, saying, okay, we'll spend $1 million on recruiting and we'll make sure everything else. They probably put more money into the hockey program than anything at Boston College. So
that's right.
But look, it is really, it's something that is going to play out on the college football landscape over the coming years. It's going to be very interesting to see how, I think the timing, so this is something else to think about. I think Jack Swarbrick and the timing of certain decisions that are going to be coming up and the transition to Pete Bavacqua is, in my opinion, a very admirable of Jack Swarbrick in a lot of different ways to either recognize, these are things that either I really don't even want to have to deal with, or I'm ready to move on. And I think someone else will be able to come in that has a little bit more experience with certain things and where the landscape is going to take Notre Dame in that direction in a better way. Not that he couldn't do it, but they're probably better equipped to deal with what's coming for Notre Dame. And for him to take a step back and analyze that and make the move that he's making right now, you kind of have to tip your cap to Jack Swarbrick and say, that's pretty admirable.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. And, since we're kind of touching on the subject of TV, I saw on the IB boards over the weekend, someone was asking, with all of the layoffs that ESPN made last week, if like maybe ESPN was essentially saving up money or, looking for ways, like to give themselves a better opportunity to go after Notre Dame in this TV contract. And I'll just say, I follow a lot of the sports media reporters and stuff like that. We've had one on in the past on this show, listen to their podcasts and, read a lot of their stuff. And so I've kind of been following, we don't talk about like a lot of the minutia, that they cover on this, like the ESPN, but these layoffs have been coming for a long time. Like this has been, unfortunately, they were coming for a long time. There's been a lot of speculation about who they would be. Disney's stock has been steadily declining for several years. So like this was a corporate, this wasn't just an ESPN thing. This came from Disney, the corporate side of things. And so
it's definitely a transition.
Yeah, exactly. Happening. This was a very big picture thing that that Disney did. So I would be like, I would give that like a 1% chance that, like ESPN going after Notre Dame had anything to do with something like that. Because again, just following this for a long time, it's been in the works for quite a while.
Absolutely. It just, from the inside being there, it's probably been 5 years in the making.
Right.
And once the Chicago station was sold to Good Karma Brands about 4 years ago, Disney was letting everybody know that they were getting out of the terrestrial radio business. And Chicago was the first domino to fall. LA and New York were also purchased by Good Karma Brands, I believe last year. And that's them saying we're getting out of the radio business. And they made some adjustments. They lessened their expenses. And then they recognize, you know what? This is something that they do. I give them credit. People don't understand the minor league type of talent pool that they create. And they follow a lot of different people. And then they create this atmosphere. You can tell when they start bringing in a lot of younger people and they start hiring certain people like Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed is somebody that I came into ESPN with. He's become a draft expert for them. And when he got hired, I said, wait a minute, something's going to happen because they're not about to have 3 guys doing the NFL draft. And lo and behold, we see Todd McShay and his high salary, part ways with ESPN. So, like you said, you can see the writing on the wall from a business perspective with the stock, the selling off of the radio stations, getting out of that side of the business, going more to podcasting and TV. And they're really about to pour a lot more money into their podcasting, which they haven't done. So,
right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something that, they've never really figured out exactly which way they wanted to go, I think, with podcasting. Because, they had Bill Simmons back in the day and he started, and they really, it just sounds like, they couldn't really decide if they wanted to go all in on that. And that kind of led to Simmons, I think, leaving and doing the Ringer and all that stuff.
One of the biggest failures was they didn't recognize every podcast that they had that was successful. They wanted to make it a TV show.
That's true.
Jalen Rose started out as a podcast. Jamel Hill and Mike Smith started out as a podcast, and they became wildly successful. And they said, "Oh, we can turn this into a TV show." And they could have monetized all of those programs and built a monstrous podcast division, and they just failed to do that. So everything can't be a TV show. They're not meant to be TV shows.
No, that's a good point. But the other thing with the direction that ESPN is going right now, live sports is obviously a big part of it. That's why they went after the SEC, and they've obviously had live sports all over the place. But from a day to day, they want the Stephen A. Smiths. They're bringing in Pat McAfee. That's what they want. They want a handful of these big names that they're paying the big money to, and sort of the rank and file are getting sifted out along the way. That's
and you know what? And a lot of people think that it was, everything in this country becomes political, right? You have different personalities, and all those different personalities at that network add up to different points of views when it comes to life issues and things of that nature. And all of us in life have blind spots, just certain things we don't get that might need to be explained to us. And when we convey it, it might not come across the right way to certain people. But at the end of the day, this is not a byproduct of ESPN going woke, ESPN doing this. This is really boardroom business and looking at the numbers and crunching the numbers and saying, hey, we have to cut the fat here. We have to cut the fat there. And now you come to the situation where regardless of what they cut or they do, they're still winning in the ratings. And that is the ultimate thing for them. They want to win in the ratings. And as much as people, what they create, which is great, Shaun, this is what they do. And I know this for a fact. They don't care how you feel. They just want you to feel.
Right.
They don't care how you feel about Stephen A. Smith. They just want you to feel.
Right.
Because if you feel, you'll listen. Or you'll be mad.
It's just like Notre Dame, basically.
Yes.
It's just like Notre Dame. Notre Dame, the Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, and like you said, with Stephen A. Smith as well. It's polarization is good
Yes.
for anything, and I think that, that's why, like when as we kind of shift back out of the ESPN mode, we got sidetracked on that for a little bit, but I thought that, those are great points that you brought up.
Yeah.
But Notre Dame has had staying power, I think, because of it's not just the national appeal, it's also the other side that you're talking about. But I mean, this goes way back years and years and years. Like when you look at how Notre Dame, I think, has been able to stay as independent for as long as they have. It's like Newt Rockne got the team on the trains and they went to New York. They went east to New York and they played Army and Navy when those were national powers years and years and years ago. They kept playing them. They got on the train and headed west and obviously started the rivalry with Southern Cal and did that. But along the way, like they had an annual series with SMU for a while, back when SMU was still a thing. They played Texas. They played Oklahoma, in the middle of the country. All these, so like when you're doing that decade after decade, you're literally talking about they've been, like when you think about when Newt Rockne was still doing it, they've literally been, that goes back almost 100 years now at this point. So you're talking about 4 to 5 generations of fans who, were used to seeing Notre Dame in that part of the country when those other big schools, even the Texas and Oklahomas, winning all, their championships in the the 50s and the 60s and whenever, they weren't doing that same kind of thing, but Notre Dame was. And you've got Notre Dame essentially has roots all over the country as a result, and it's made some people love them and it's made some people hate them. But again, that's part of being a national brand, a national product, I think.
It's amazing because Notre Dame has already done what the Big Ten claims they've established. The Big Ten claimed we're the first conference to be a coast-to-coast conference. And Notre Dame as an independent established that years ago. Years ago. So this is what you're talking about.
They're like, we did that. We didn't have to be a conference.
Exactly. So everyone's playing catch up and they're mad that Notre Dame won't join them. And Notre Dame is like, well, you're doing what we've already accomplished. So why should we join you? Give us a good reason to join you. Show us something new that is a trend-setting move in college football, and we'll join you to say, you know what? Yeah, we need to make a move to do that because this is something that's going to bring something fresh and new to the Notre Dame brand and tradition, and no one can do that.
That's exactly right. Let me ask you this, though, because you are an Illinois guy, like do you consider yourself a Big Ten guy at your core, or, like what? I guess my bigger question is, as a guy who's got, Big Ten ties, is there any part of you that wants to see Notre Dame join the Big Ten? Are you are you full bore straight ahead independence as long as possible?
It's interesting. Someone asked me recently, would you rather see Notre Dame win another national championship in football, or would you rather see Illinois win a national championship? And I said, well, that's not fair. I said, because my football fandom has belonged to Notre Dame since I was an infant. I said, but if Illinois could win a national title in basketball, that would I might trade that off for another national championship in football, because I've experienced a national championship in football as a Notre Dame fan. And so to answer the question, I guess I am a Big Ten guy at heart, especially when it comes to Illinois basketball. But nothing trumps, what my grandfather was able to put into me, the first time I went into Notre Dame Stadium and he put me on his lap. That's just the foundation of who I am, as a sports fan. So
generation to generation.
Yeah.
That's it. But like what you're describing is what a lot of Indiana people, especially people who grew up in the Bobby Knight days and, that thing. It's like you were an Indiana basketball fan, but a Notre Dame football fan. Same kind of deal that you're talking about there with Illinois. I think there are a lot of people like that. That's for sure. Tim B asked, "Don't you guys miss those old Big Ten matchups, though?" And we were talking about like who we would and wouldn't want Notre Dame to play. I don't care if they ever play Purdue again. Like that. That's one that I I always felt like it meant much more to the Purdue side than
Yeah.
it did the Notre Dame side,
Yeah.
and it just I it doesn't do anything for me. I know that there are a lot of people who grew up because Notre Dame played Purdue every year for much longer than they ever played Michigan every year, for example. But I like Vince can't stand Michigan. He doesn't want to see Michigan ever come back. Michigan State, I'm really not that hot on Michigan State coming because there are only so many rivals that I think you can keep on the schedule every year because it ends up meaning more to them than it means to you. I don't mind seeing, some of these Big Ten schools maybe rotate through, but I
Yeah.
don't necessarily like having them all on there every year. What do you think?
The Penn State tradition intrigues me because of what it meant when Lou Holtz was here and they would battle Penn State.
Right. Every
And
year.
it would be a fantastic physical matchup. That intrigues me. I actually liked the George Perlis matchups with Lou Holtz. And then, Mark D'Antoni, what he brought to Michigan State after Nick Saban left, I think was admirable. And they gave Brian Kelly some fits. And they had some great games. I mean, the Little Giants game, the comeback with Terrell Lambert and the defense intercepting balls and getting pick sixes in the fourth quarter at Michigan State. Those are some great. Michigan State Notre Dame is giving you some great games. Who can forget Arnell's battle and the long touchdown in the fourth quarter against Michigan State? Those have been from Pat Dillon. Just great games. And when you have the history
that one,
of great,
it's funny that you mentioned that game because that game we did a couple weeks ago. What's the most frustrated you've ever been? That game right up until
absolutely
battle or took that pass from Pat Dillingham. I thought they were going to lose because they had just beaten Michigan the week before, and it was like under 2 minutes to go. Michigan State had taken the lead, but you're right. There's been a lot of classic moments, but that one ticked me off so bad right up until they scored to go back ahead.
So I can understand Penn State, Michigan State, but like you said, who does it mean more to? The Michigan Notre Dame battle is not just about Notre Dame and Michigan. It's about supremacy as far as most wins in college football and that battle that continues to rage on, national championships. And, it is really something to, and if you talk to former Notre Dame players, even when they were playing Miami, former Notre Dame players would tell you, we knew we were more physical than Miami. We knew we were more physical than Florida State. But boy, we knew when we were facing Michigan, that was about to be two heavyweights in the middle of the ring, just landing body blows and haymakers for 4 quarters. And it was a true test of who we were. So they have a profound respect. If you ask the players, they probably would say, oh, Michigan without question, just from a respect standpoint.
That's true. And to be honest, it's funny you bring up Miami because now granted that Miami thing turned, so nasty there, and that's obviously why they got rid of it. But like today, 30 years later, I miss the Miami rivalry much more than I miss Michigan State or Purdue. I'll tell you that much.
Well, you get a matchup next season.
That's right. It's coming.
It's coming. You get the matchup next season, and what they're building down there, what Mario Cristobal is trying to build. I don't know if they will be at the level where they'll be ready to compete with Notre Dame, because I do think Notre Dame in year 2 under Marcus Freeman will take a step forward and become a much better football team than they were last year. But ultimately, that rivalry, I was at the game in 2012 in Soldier Field, and it was just, you talk about Miami not having a chance at all.
Man. That was, and it's funny that's pretty much been most of the Notre Dame Miami matchups, that they played really in that time period. The 2017 game down at Miami is the only time that Miami really showed up, it seems like. Otherwise, Notre Dame was far superior to any of those Miami teams. Chi-Town says we should play 2 Big Ten games in a rotation with our historic rivals. I don't disagree with that. And to be honest, and again, we've talked about this before as well. If Notre Dame does end up re-upping with NBC, and this has been reported as well, because of that, new NBC deal with the Big Ten, there's a pretty good likelihood that you're going to see Notre Dame start to add in, more consistently some Big Ten non-conference games just because of that agreement, because it gives NBC a chance to put even, more, even like they can even put the road games that Notre Dame plays on NBC now, if they do that. It gives them a better chance to do that. So I think we're going to see more of it going forward if Notre Dame does end up staying with NBC.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. If you look at the NBC schedule this year, it's not impressive as far as the games they have. But, you start adding the rivalry games and the connection of Notre Dame to those games, absolutely. It definitely becomes a big-time draw for NBC and the Big Ten.
Do you see any benefit to Notre Dame joining a conference in the world that we're living in right now, the world of college athletics?
I believe in independence, as far as, ownership, business. So, nah. As long as you can create a brand that can stand the test of time and continue to build and earn, what it deserves in the open market, I'm all for staying independent. The only thing that would change my mind would be the college football playoff getting to the point where Notre Dame would not have a path to the national championship without being part of a conference. That's the only thing that would really move me as far as joining a conference. The history of the Big Ten and when Notre Dame wanted to be part of the Big Ten and seriously considered it, the schools that blocked them and all of this stuff, and Notre Dame's not a fit in the SEC, in my opinion, and the ACC fiscally just doesn't match with Notre Dame right now, the way things are going. So the Big Ten is really, honestly, the only option moving forward that might be viable. And in doing that, I still don't see them making that move unless their feet are really put to the fire.
And that's going to have to be it, and the way that their feet get put to the fire is what happens with the Olympic sports, because again, they've got the access to the college football playoff. We're pretty confident they're going to end up with a good TV contract. So those are the two biggest things. What happens with the Olympic sports? I still think that worst case scenario, like if the ACC blew up and you still have access to the playoff, you still have your TV contract. So that means you've got good revenue sources. And again, by being independent, you have another revenue source of keeping all the money for every time you get to the college football playoff. I would think that worst case scenario, the basketballs and everybody else could find their way to the Big East.
Yeah.
And, because they're all the other Catholic schools over there in the Big East right now. I would think that would be like the worst case fallback for the Olympic sports, which means I think if Notre Dame wanted to, even if the ACC blew up, they'd still be fine.
So this is something else to think about. The impact on the other sports, like you said, the Olympic sports, and the impact on both basketball teams. Like ultimately, I think the ACC connection for Mike Brey came at a perfect time. Like just to build the program, to establish the program and move that forward. Now coming out of that, could have transitioned to the Big Ten with the Big Ten acquiring USC and UCLA from a basketball standpoint. Could that now be better for Notre Dame basketball to be connected to the Big Ten? It's very interesting how things are playing out in the landscape and eventually what might be better for each individual sport under the Notre Dame umbrella. But as far as football is just fun.
It's its own thing.
Yeah.
Josh says he'd like to see Notre Dame remain independent, but instead of playing the 5 ACC opponents, switch it to Big Ten. The only problem with that, and that could happen at some point, again, I think the ACC's got to blow up first, basically, for that to happen, because Notre Dame, as of right now, has a contract with the ACC that runs through 2036. Notre Dame's contract just like the rest of the ACC. It runs for 13 more years, and there's buyouts and all that kind of stuff. If you're going to get it, so unless the ACC, unless those schools find a way to get out, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, I totally agree with you there. I totally agree with you.
And the other side of that is, would the Big Ten even want that? Just because of all the back and forth over the years between Notre Dame and the Big Ten. Like, I don't know that the Big Ten would want to do that. It's like either you're in or you're out kind of
thing.
We've been dancing around this for a long time, right? So
that probably would irritate them even more if Notre Dame was able to dance around, keep their independence, but yet still benefit off of the scheduling and the TV deal as well. No, I don't see them liking that.
I agree. Well, Shaun, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it, man. Are you kidding me?
Let
me write this date down. I told my wife earlier today, I'm doing rapid fire today, baby.
That's right. Was she as excited as you were about it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
She said, you better not mess up. So she did put the pressure on me. She put the pressure on me.
All right. Well, we didn't start with what's got everybody worked up today, though we've had plenty of comments about it in the chat here tonight. So which was the bigger weekend shocker, Shaun? Wide receiver Isiah Canion decommitting from Notre Dame, or defensive lineman Justin Scott announcing his commitment to go to Ohio State?
Now, it's interesting because immediately I'm sure most people are going to say, oh, he's going to say Justin Scott. And I was leaning that way originally. And as I get the backstory to the Isiah Canion situation and just how connected he was, and after he committed, he visited multiple times getting back to the campus and seemed to be locked in. And then all of a sudden, just within the last 10 days, it seems like, the staff started to worry and started to get noise that, things weren't as well. And then to find out the reasoning behind everything, it's just a strange set of circumstances. Really, I've never really seen these type of circumstances. And then for him to commit to Georgia Tech.
That's the big shot, right?
Yes. So for me, I'm going to say Isiah Canion and the way things have played out was a lot more shocking than understanding that Ryan Day was in the gym. Ryan Day was the head coach that got him to pause on his commitment January 31st, which eventually would have been Notre Dame. So for Ohio State to come in and get that commitment, it's not a shock to me because they were the ones that originally came in and stopped the Notre Dame train from lighting up on January 31st.
Yeah, see, like I was shocked by Canion. It's like, oh boy, here we go. And of course that turned into a thing. And I guess at least when you saw, again, it's shocking, I think, to see him go to Georgia Tech, but at the same time, with him being where he's from, Georgia, with Warner Robins, right? Yeah. So it's like, at least at least the action that followed the decommitment matched up with the reason that he gave. He wanted to stay closer to home, had a relative that, didn't want to fly and all those different kind of things. The Justin Scott thing was just like, we kept hearing all these things. And I kind of thought that the longer this sort of, he was out there and he wasn't committed to anyone, it seemed like, well, maybe Notre Dame's got a chance in this thing. And because like, obviously we were, you're here in Miami, and then, well, it's not going to be Miami. He wants to stay closer to the Midwest. And it's like, oh, okay. Michigan obviously in play. And then all of a sudden out of left field, it's Ohio State. And to me, it was kind of like seeing him commit to Ohio State was kind of like, it's like a heel turn in pro wrestling,
That's nice. I like that.
It's like when Andre the Giant,
decided to Hulk Hogan.
With Hulk Hogan. Yeah. He's joining up with Bobby the Brain, it's like, that's what it seemed like with Justin Scott. I think it caught everybody off guard that, maybe not that he committed someplace besides Notre Dame, but that it was Ohio State of all places.
Well, that heel turn was the heel turn that eventually put Hulk Hogan over at WrestleMania and made him a superstar. So hopefully
there you go.
This might be a heel turn that eventually turns into Notre Dame getting over the hump.
Maybe it comes back.
Maybe they flip him and get him in the class on National Signing Day. But I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from, and knowing that he, as I said before, Notre Dame fans feel a certain way, but he actually told Michigan that he was coming.
Right.
If I'm Mike Elston today, I'm probably like, man, like Notre Dame knew as of last weekend that he wasn't committing to them.
Right.
Michigan felt we got him, he's committed to us, and then all of a sudden things change. And the reason he gave is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure there are other reasons, that probably led to the ultimate decision besides just Larry Johnson being a hall. Look, Larry Johnson at Penn State is a Hall of Fame defensive line coach.
Right.
You bring him to Ohio State and combine both of those without question. Notre Dame doesn't have anything that can match that. And Mike Elston, even though he has a long list of guys that he brought to Notre Dame and developed, and they're playing in the NFL right now, he can't match that. But I would be honest and say there's a little bit more to it than just Larry Johnson and some other things. And one of those things is, and I said this, and I think people just chose not to listen to it. I told people about a month ago, he's paying attention to whom he's going to be playing with on the defensive side of the ball in the class. And everybody just kind of let it go by their ears. I'm like, he's paying attention to and at that point in time, the Michigan class had gained a lot of momentum. They were getting a lot of commitments. And then recently, Ohio State just added the number 3 defensive end in the country. They have the number 3 defensive lineman in Justin Scott, and then the number 5 defensive lineman in Justin Scott. So, and the number 1 defensive back in Aaron Scott. So you start looking at who he could look at to say, these are the guys that I'm coming in with, that I'm going to play with. And he starts to compare it along with other factors. And yes, he said from the jump that NIL was a factor. He never hid that. NIL is going to be a factor. So it's actually refreshing, in my opinion, to see a kid go through the process, sit down with his parents, sit down with his coaches, come to a decision, and then come back to his coaches and say, man, I'm not so sure after thinking about it. And then talk about it all over again and make a decision, regardless of what the factors were. This is how you want most decisions to be made. And now we'll see if Notre Dame can take it into the fall. Look, this worked out great for Notre Dame, in my opinion. Because if it was any other school from the South, they probably would have had a chance to play the Midwest card, stay close to home. If it were Michigan, I really think, this is me, from the first time I met him, the affinity he had for Michigan and that program, the way he spoke about that program, I think it would have been very difficult to get him away from the Wolverines. Ohio State, on the other side, is something that you can possibly lure him for a visit in September for that game as you continue to work on him.
Right.
And if you walk onto that field and Notre Dame handles business against Ohio State, that's something that you can say that you didn't have in your back pocket when you were recruiting him in the spring and in the summer. Right. Now you can say, look, I know it might not look a certain way on the books to you, but we just showed you on the field that we're better than that.
Right. And I know people are upset and frustrated, and I get it. They've got to Notre Dame, especially that position, the 2 defensive positions that have got to get better are on the line and at safety. We've seen some improvement at safety lately, but and people have yet they're still not able to get that big 5-star, regardless of what the position is. And that's something that they've, got to start doing better. But, for the people who want to say, well, Freeman, so much for Freeman recruiting at a higher clip, the 24 class still has a 60% blue chip ratio. The percentage of 4-star to 5-star. Now, obviously, they're all 4 stars. It's still 60%.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly, in his last 4 seasons here at Notre Dame, pre-Marcus Freeman classes, was sitting at around 53% for those 4 classes. He had a 72% one time. The rest of them were all in the 50s. Marcus Freeman so far in his 2 years, including this one, is at 72%. So like he's still doing a much better job of consistently at least getting 4 stars as opposed to 3s, but they've got to be able to start, knocking it out with some of these 5-star guys to truly be able to get over the hump and truly be able to say, we can compete with the Ohio States and the Alabamas and Georgias when it comes to playoff time.
And they don't have to have a roster littered with 5 stars, Shaun.
Right.
They've been able to compete as
but
Notre
you got to
Dame.
do better than just Jalen Snead and Michael Mayer over the last 6 years.
Absolutely. And it starts, I think the biggest improvement, in my opinion, has been the improvement with the quarterback room. I think Kenny Minchie was an upgrade. I think CJ Carr is another upgrade.
Totally.
And I think Deuce Knight pretty much saying is Notre Dame and Tennessee.
But that's where you can also overcome it. If you're sitting there at the 72% that Marcus Freeman is at, and you get a more, closer to elite quarterback, quarterbacks of the level that you're talking about, and recruited a 72% blue chip, level of, pretty consistently, you get the quarterback, then you're changing the game, because that's essentially the formula that Clemson had.
Absolutely.
When they had Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson.
Absolutely. The only difference is Clemson has been able to establish getting 5-star defensive linemen,
right,
and getting them to the NFL. And now that sells itself for Dabo Swinney. Like, this is what we do. We bring you in, we get you to the first round of the NFL draft, and we win. That's something that Notre Dame is going to have to break. They're going to have to break the ice eventually. Someone's going to have to be that first guy. They're not giving up on Justin Scott. Can he be that guy later on in the year? Notre Dame is going to have to win on the field to make up the difference. That's really going to be the most impactful thing for Justin Scott. He has to be able to see Notre Dame make up a difference on the field for him to say, you know what? This is the team, this is the head coach that I do want to play for, but the other factors at this point in time just outweigh the fact that I love Marcus Freeman. And that's where things sit.
So JP asks, does this reflect on Freeman because he's the one who hired Golden? I would think Freeman drops Al and makes Mickens the DC at the end of the year. What do you think about all this with again, everyone wants to, assess blame and all that kind of stuff. What do you think?
It is going to be tough. And look, for me, I'm going to scream this from the mountaintop. I think recruiting in this day is so much more than the head coach, and it's so much more than your staff. That's the core of recruiting, absolutely. But the truth of the matter is, and I've talked this over with Brian Driscoll, every team has maybe 3 excellent recruiters on staff. Maybe 3.
That's true.
And then you might have another 3 or 4 that just really grind out, just really work hard at it to get everything out. And then you have some that are left over that everyone helps out to even things out. But it's the support staff, right? It's Alabama having a 70-man recruiting staff, right? It's Clemson having a 15 to 20-man recruiting staff. It's Georgia pouring almost $5 million into recruiting and everything that goes into that, identifying talent and making relationships with talent. Notre Dame has to step into that stratosphere, right? Because it's bigger than just Marcus Freeman. Because Marcus Freeman more than likely is going to knock down the door and get you in the door for 5 stars, right?
Right.
But then is it really fair at this point when you know your coaches don't have the cachet of a Larry Johnson, of the other big-time assistant coaches that are at these other schools? Okay, they're kind of at a disadvantage as well. So how do you supplement that? Well, you supplement that by being all in as a staff collectively, whether offensively or defensively. It's not just about, okay, we're going to get this kid in, and then Coach Freeman, you have to close. No, everybody has to be viewed as an integral part of the recruiting of top athletes until you get to the point where the winning on the field takes over and development takes over, and you can point to the NFL draft. That's 2 or 3 years down the line, possibly, Shaun. So what are we supposed to do until then? Just believe that we can't get it done? Marcus Freeman isn't going to believe that. He believes wholeheartedly that he can get it done. Mm-hmm. He believes that he can get 5-star kids to come to Notre Dame and show them that they are Notre Dame kids. But it's going to have to come from everybody putting in the work. He said it best on the Pivot interview. It's not about to happen because I go to the grotto and pray. It's not about to happen because of that.
That's right.
There's some work that needs to be done.
Still got to go out and do the work. That's right.
Absolutely. There's work that needs to be done by everyone in that building, man. This is not just about, the coaches and market. No, recruiting is a group effort when you really look at these top programs. And there are a lot of people responsible for the successes of the best recruiting programs.
And at the same time, because of all the things that you're talking about, the results on the field, I just feel like this is a huge, huge season for Al Washington with, like when you talk about development for what happens with that defensive line on the field because of, some of the things you're talking about, like, can you show that, these are the kind of guys you want to play, next to, that this defensive line coach is the kind of defensive line coach that can develop you and turn you into an NFL guy down the road. All those different things. If you're not the best recruiter, you have to make up for it, obviously, with what you do the rest of the, with when you're out there on the field with those guys, with the development that you have with those guys. Yeah. And I guess what's, I think what a lot of people will look at is Marcus Freeman's words when, the day he, stood up there at the podium when he was announced as the head coach and talked about everyone's got to be invested in recruiting. And, again, you said it, it's a joint team collaborative effort, but at the same time, you can't have guys that lag too far behind, especially when you're still trying to get the big hits like they're trying to get right now.
And to go back to what we spoke about earlier, tip of the cap to Jack Swarbrick, because the landscape is changing, and maybe Jack Swarbrick understands either I'm not really equipped or I don't feel comfortable making certain decisions that may need to be made for Notre Dame to step into that stratosphere that's going to improve recruiting and ultimately support Marcus Freeman and these coaches to make the job just a little bit easier. Because it's difficult to walk into these elite kid schools and homes and convince them to come to Notre Dame. That's a difficult task in 2023. And it was difficult before NIL. Now with NIL,
it's even tougher.
It's even tougher. So we know this. They need all the support that they can get from administration, faculty, athletic director, president. Everybody needs to be on board for things to truly turn around.
Greg says he believes the fall is where we flip some of these guys. And that, Notre Dame has had some success the last few years.
Absolutely.
In flipping guys. So just because guys are, it's a great point. And I think you said it too, like you do have an opportunity to potentially still get Justin Scott in for a visit when Notre Dame and Ohio State play, especially, but you can show him the Notre Dame side of things when Ohio State is in that weekend. And, whether it's him or anyone else, I wouldn't just close the door on anybody. I still think, that they could potentially flip some guys down there.
Absolutely.
Especially if things are going well, which again, like the season becomes even more important, I think.
I totally agree with that.
All right, so we started the show obviously talking about independence. Penn State's been in the Big Ten for 30 years. Mm-hmm. If they had it to do over again, Shaun, do you think that they would stay independent, join the Big Ten, or join a different conference?
They made the right decision.
You think so?
I look at it and I say, yeah, Penn State definitely made the right decision. They were on an island, and I think they made the right decision for the rest of their sports, because I believe when they got to the Big Ten, their men's and women's volleyball exploded. and they became really good. It impacted. They haven't taken off, but they've had mild success with their basketball teams, men's and women's, in the Big Ten. So I think the effect it had on the other sports was a positive. As far as the football, they came right to the conference. And I remember that Kajana Carter team with Kerry Collins came down to Champaign, and we thought we had them. It was 28-7. 28-7. We're like, oh, we're about to upset the number one team in the nation. We got them. And they come back and they rattle off, 28 straight, and they ultimately win the game 35-28. And they sent all of us home to our dorm rooms. Just we couldn't believe what we just watched. And that itself, the transition, the way they came in, the success they had, and ultimately, they truly have been a foil to whether it's Michigan or Ohio State in different years. And then you have to tip your cap because what they went through, we all understand the scandal. And I think if they had gone through that scandal as an independent, Shaun, I don't know how things play out. But I think the fact that they were solidified and covered by the Big Ten,
right,
to be able to go through that, I think it helped tremendously in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I just don't see a way. Again, Notre Dame has been able to stay independent because of the national brand that they are. Now, you can argue that Penn State was a bigger national brand when they were still independent, but what did they not have that Notre Dame came up with at about the same time Penn State decided to go independent? A TV contract, their own national TV contract. And that's essentially why, whether it's Penn State or Florida State, Miami, BYU, all these different schools, like, BYU gave independence a shot for a while. It didn't work out because they're not near the the national brand of even Penn State, let alone Notre Dame. Plus, they didn't have a TV contract the way Notre Dame has. And so I don't think that Penn State, even though they've kind of become, to an extent, just one of the other schools in the Big Ten, they still, I don't see them. There was not a path for them to remain independent in the same way that Notre Dame has remained independent.
Not at all. And out of those schools that you mentioned earlier, I think the one school for me that shocked me the most, and this is me not understanding the business side from a university standpoint, because now that I know the history, there were some big time fiscal issues on the administration side and the educational side at the University of Miami. But as far as like a brand and how powerful Miami was at that point in time,
right,
especially when it comes to like apparel and the people they were putting into the professional,
like mid-90s,
yes,
early to mid-90s Miami. Yeah, that's right.
It kind of shocked me when they chose to go to the Big East. I'm like, why are they joining? What is this?
I know.
Do they really have to go to the Big East? And it was for survival. Not for the football program. It was really for the survival of the university and the things that were happening outside of the football program.
Yeah, exactly. But again, minus a TV contract like Notre Dame has, it just your ability to do that, because the rest of you, because not only was the football program independent, that means everybody else was independent for a long time as well. They didn't have they didn't have the same kind of arrangement that Notre Dame had. So
agreed.
Yeah, I just, and as far as another conference for Penn State, maybe the ACC. I think you could argue that maybe they'd be better off in a place like the ACC now. But I tend to agree with a lot of what you said about them in the Big Ten. Even though they haven't won a lot of Big Ten championships, I think that for the success of all of their athletic programs, the Big Ten has probably been a good place for them. They just haven't been able to find any rivals. That's what Penn State is missing, some rivals.
Yep.
All right, fill in the blank. If you could switch places with anyone in sports for 24 hours, it would be blank.
Right now, I'm a huge baseball fan. it would be Mookie Betts. I think Mookie Betts is absolutely amazing. Right behind him would probably be Shohei Ohtani right now.
I like
Like
that.
if I could just feel to be the most dangerous power here in baseball and then be the most dangerous pitcher
No kidding.
4 days later, that has to feel like he has to feel like a Greek god right now. The way things are going, like he is just
I know.
all powerful, man, omnipotent. But Mookie Betts to me, I say it because he's my favorite player, but he plays center field, right field, second base. He's played shortstop this year. That's a dream, man. Because like I was left-handed. So when you're left-handed, you can't play on the infield. I couldn't stand that, right? Because I grew up wanting to be a shortstop, but I couldn't be a shortstop because I was left-handed. And just to have that opportunity to play that many different positions and be great at it and be that type of athlete, I would probably want to be Mookie Betts.
Interesting. Mookie Betts that's a really good one. It's like amazing the level. I think it's kind of gotten lost with him in Los Angeles just because he's West Coast now instead of, in the middle of that Red Sox Yankees rivalry. But you haven't seen much drop off, if any at all, from Mookie Betts, since he moved out there. He's pretty freaking awesome too. I went with Roger Goodell just because, like Roger Goodell makes $65 million a year. And like, he obviously catches a lot of grief. Like, that's a lot of money to be the commissioner of a sport and not even, be a guy like Mookie Betts or Shohei Ohtani or, Aaron Rodgers, obviously, or Tom Brady, not the guy playing the sport. The commissioner of the sport is making $65 million a year. So I would like to be in Roger Goodell's shoes on the toughest day of the year that he has and like see like what is it he really deals with that is worthy of making that kind of money.
Would you change anything though?
Whew, man. That's a good question. What would I change? We were talking about it on like I would like to see a different with the salary cap and the quarterbacks. I would like to see a different salary, like the way the quarterback's contract is handled, with the huge amount of money and the impact that it has on the salary cap.
Yeah.
That is something that I would like to see changed. How about you? Would you change
maybe
anything?
That's interesting. Maybe like a certain percentage of the quarterback only counts against the cap to give you more flexibility. If I were Roger Goodell right now, I would be a little bit more honest about what's going on. And I understand the integrity of the shield is very important, but heck, you got a football team in Las Vegas, for Christ's sakes. So that you've already crossed that line when it comes to integrity and worried about gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the way of the world is people gamble on their phones. They lay parlays for hockey, Major League Baseball. NFL players are going to gamble. They're going to gamble. And I understand trying to lay down the law and make sure that it doesn't impact the game. No, you don't want any football player betting on the game that he's actually playing in. That's just not good business. But I don't know. I just think the world is evolving, man. And I think eventually the NFL is going to have to open itself up and maybe have a little better understanding of, how things are going. Because ultimately, obviously, the players keep trying to find a way to do it. You would think the 2 players last year they got popped would discredit and discourage guys from wanting to do it. And here we are. Now we're up to 5 guys before we even get to camp that are out for the year. It is a trend that I think he has to pay attention to. And he has to sit with the players union and say, look, we have to make this somehow even for both sides, to where we're not taking the fun away from the players being able to gamble, but at the same time protecting the league and protecting the shield. And I'm sure there's a way to do it.
Isiah Rodgers, apparently, the Colts defensive back, who's one of the guys who got suspended, he bet a game prop on I didn't see which teammate it was, but basically like the over under on one of his teammates rushing yards in a
Yeah,
game. So like not only, like, are you kidding me? Like, you just have to be smarter than that. If you're
absolutely.
like, he deserves every amount of the suspension that he
Hmm.
got. But you're right. It's, like, guys are going to gamble. You've got to figure out some way to work around this a little bit, because as soon as you allow this in, guys are going to do it.
Oh,
And like you said,
absolutely.
you've brought a team to Las Vegas, and I know that apparently when a visiting team goes to Las Vegas, they're not allowed to go to a sports book and all this different stuff. It's like, there's so many temptations you're laying out there for these
You know
guys.
what's so weird? Boxers can actually bet on themselves in a prize fight.
Really?
Yeah, Floyd Mayweather has bet on himself several times in
You
his
can bet
own
on
prize fights.
yourself, but not against yourself, is what you're saying.
I don't know the rules, but I know he has. I don't think he can physically show up, but he can have someone that's a representative for him and tell
Place
them,
money.
yeah, place money on me,
Wow.
knockout, seventh round, decision, whatever. And he's one of the biggest prop players in Vegas. He does it all the time with sports like first half NBA, second half NBA. He's constantly doing that and making those moves. And if you can do it in boxing against yourself, because that would be something I would like, oh man, you're putting this amount of money on yourself. Now it would be strange if you bet against yourself. That would be something that would be an eye raise, right?
Right.
Like, wait a minute, Floyd
See, that's
Mayweather
what
bet
I'm
against
saying. Yeah.
himself.
It's
Yeah,
like Butch in Pulp Fiction, like Butch, I guess no, I guess he did bet on himself, right? Yeah, because
yeah,
it's like he was supposed to, yeah, that's right, because he was supposed to go down in the third. That's right.
yeah.
So, but he actually bet the money on himself and knocked the guy
Hmm.
out instead. So
Yeah.
he turned it around. That's right. He didn't bet against himself.
So if athletes are betting on themselves in other sports, I mean, I would bet on myself. Like, say I'm coming into the
I
season.
mean, it
I
makes you
want
work that much harder, right? If you bet on yourself,
yes.
like,
If I have a prop bet that I'm rushing for 1,400 yards and I lay money on it as a running back in the NFL, what's wrong with that?
right.
How am I
As long as you're taking the over, right?
right? How am I impacting the game in a negative way?
Right.
This is now the only thing that can hurt me is if my team and my teammates don't like it and they, do some unscrupulous stuff to make sure that I don't get to that number. But yeah.
All right. I saw someone ask this question over the weekend. In their prime, which of these college running backs are you taking? You got Reggie Bush,
Yeah.
you got Saquon Barkley,
Mhm.
Adrian Peterson, or Ezekiel Elliott. Which of those guys are you taking in their prime in college?
Love them all. Just the impact of special teams, passing game, and running game, Reggie Bush. And Saquon Barkley was like right in that pocket of being able to impact all three areas. But Reggie Bush was something special to watch. He just truly was something special to watch. And you had to stay up late to watch him, which I did late nights on the West Coast. He was, and I remember him walking in. And this is, look, you have big games. He walked into Notre Dame Stadium and just two big time runs. It's like that's who he was, right?
Right.
And I think Pete Carroll he'll be haunted for throwing the ball and not giving it to Marshawn Lynch in the Super Bowl, and he'll be haunted for going forward on 4th and 1 against Texas with Reggie Bush on the sideline. Those are the two calls that will forever haunt Pete Carroll.
Right.
You got the best player in the world, and he's on the sideline. I just don't understand.
I mean, the only thing Reggie couldn't do really was run between the tackles, right?
Absolutely,
because the guy averaged like 7.5 yards a carry or something like that. But they had Lendale White to run between the tackles, and he could do everything else that you're talking about and just fly downfield. So that's why, like, to me, it was between him and Adrian Peterson, because Peterson is the opposite. He could obviously run between the tackles, and he could also get outside on you real quick. He just wasn't that, obviously that flashy kind of receiver that a Saquon or a Reggie Bush were. So, but because of all the versatility and like Reggie Bush could just cause so many mismatches in the college game, and we saw it all the time. And that's why I would take him as well. But it's crazy. Adrian Peterson, his last year at Oklahoma, he ran for over 1,000 yards in just 7 games.
Wow.
Like, and then he didn't play the rest of the season, But I would go Reggie Bush as well. I was just seeing if Roger Dodger, our USC fan, had anything to add to that. I guess not. So tomorrow's the 4th of July, Shaun.
Yeah.
Is there a better Independence Day themed movie than Will Smith's Independence Day?
Let's see, I did my research for you, Shaun.
Oh, nice.
I prepared for you.
Nice.
Independence Day is the barometer. Have you seen Girls Trip? Now, so you might not be familiar with Girls Trip.
I haven't seen Girls Trip.
Girls Trip is
I know what it is, but I never saw it.
Great movie, and it's built around the Essence Fest, which is a fabulous festival that's built around the 4th of July every year in New Orleans. If you ever get an opportunity to go experience it, New Orleans by itself is one thing, but Essence Fest is absolutely amazing. Music, art, fashion, businesses all over the place, food, you'll love it. So Girls Trip would be right there. A lot of people don't know that Jaws was built around the 4th of July as well.
You're right, it was.
The classic.
I totally forgot about that.
So
you really did some work on that.
Yes, absolutely. So Jaws is a classic. You have to think about Jaws, right?
Yeah.
And last but not least, because this is one of my favorite all-time movies, there's a huge July 4th scene in The Sandlot.
That's right. That's right.
So that's built around the 4th of July.
At least the 4th of July scene, all the fireworks and all that stuff.
Yeah. So Independence Day is the barometer, without question. But I would debate that I wouldn't have a problem with anyone that brings up those other 3 films that are connected to the 4th of July.
I mean, it's hard to beat Independence Day with like Bill Pullman as the president, and the whole speech and all, this. We declare our independence and all that kind of stuff, before the jet fighters go up and attack the spaceship, and Randy Quaid, up yours, or whatever.
That was beautiful.
To my generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As much as you talk about Will Smith, he was one of the characters that really made that movie go.
He was,
in my opinion. Absolutely. Yep. And I forget the father's name, because the father had this comedic timing.
Judd Hirsch, the old
Judd Hirsch.
That was Jeff Goldblum's dad.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Man, he was
right.
hilarious.
Those two are the comedy.
Yeah.
In the whole thing. It's got to come on in the next couple of days. I just imagine. Some people saying The Patriot. I just didn't like The Patriot as much, because to me,
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, because like I loved Braveheart, and I watched Braveheart a million times, and it was just like, it was basically just like Braveheart set in the Revolutionary War, so I wasn't as in on it, because I felt like we just saw that, like in Scotland, a few hundred years before. But Independence Day got to be at the top of the list for sure.
I agree.
All right. And of course, the Nathan's hot dog eating contest is tomorrow. Can you eat anything at the level Joey Chestnut eats hot dogs, Shaun Davis?
Sunflower seeds.
You can put them down, huh?
Truth be told, I had to stop, because I would eat 2 packs of sunflower seeds every day.
No kidding.
And so much that I would sweat salt.
Really?
And so it really started to impact like my blood pressure and everything. So I had to go cold turkey and just leave it alone. So sunflower seeds for me, yes, I was at Joey Chestnut level. It was bad. It was bad. Yeah.
See, like, I'm surprised, like you didn't just get like your mouth all swollen up and all kinds of sores inside your mouth from all the sunflower seed shells and all that kind of stuff. I like to go ahead.
I used to have these mountains around the house. My wife couldn't stand it.
I bet.
And then she would find like seeds all over the carpet, and she was the happiest when I stopped.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's just like when you're out at the baseball field, like if you're playing on a turf field, they don't want any sunflower seeds out there. It's the
Yeah.
same as the carpet in your house.
Yeah.
You know, hard to vacuum up. I like to think I could do a pretty good job of eating some M&Ms, you know, like plain M&Ms. Like I could put some
Nice.
M&Ms
Yeah.
down. That's like one of my biggest vices. It's like you put M&Ms sitting around, and I just have a hard time keeping my hand out of the dish, you know. And
M&Ms and Skittles.
yeah, oh man, Skittles. I had to get off the Skittles a while back, like wrecking the team. So
I understand that. Definitely.
Chi-Town, black licorice. Ooh, man, I don't know about that. Going back to what we were talking about before, Ryan said a playoff win or a national championship would sell itself when you're talking about selling to recruits, you know, and that's what I think, that just being in the college football playoff helped Notre Dame in terms of recruiting. You know, again, they got some bumps out of being in the playoffs those 2 times in 3 years. But, you know, again, Marcus Freeman has still elevated the level of recruiting. They just haven't quite got either, you know, the big 5-star guys yet, or the place where they're making up for it, like you said, is what they're doing with the quarterback recruiting. Right now, the quarterback recruiting is a lot better just in this 2+ cycles than we saw under Brian Kelly over a long period of time.
Absolutely.
Yep. Shaun, I enjoyed it. Be safe out there. Are you going to shoot off any fireworks tomorrow?
No,
you know,
no, I'm not a fireworks guy.
I'm not either. And I think they did the fireworks here in town the other night. So I don't know if I'm even going to be able to see any fireworks. But all right, well, be safe. I appreciate it. I had a blast doing this with you. First time.
We have to do this again. We have to do it again.
For sure.
Thank you for thinking of me.
I think we need either like a pre-training camp, or once camp starts, we need to hook one up again.
Whenever you need me, I'm here. Just let me know.
I appreciate it. Well, you have a great 4th, and
you as well.
Hope to talk to you again soon sometime.
Absolutely.
All right. Hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe, rate, and review. We appreciate you being here tonight. And, of course, everybody else, you have a great 4th of July as well. And we will talk to you later this week on IB Nation Sports Talk.